Good afternoon. My name is Roy Albert. I'm a lead valuer employed by the Valuation Office Agency in Bristol. Currently, I'm carrying out challenge work, which is part of the Check Challenge Appeal. My job is to maintain a fair and accurate rating list. On a day-to-day basis, I am heavily involved in valuation work. So it's determining whether or not the rent on the property is reasonable. Besides doing valuation work, we do a lot of record keeping and making sure that record is kept in a place where somebody else can have sight of that and they can have the gist of what we're discussing. So normally part of my process would be inspecting these properties to get a better gist of what I'm dealing with. Apart from dealing with challenge work, I also help out other colleagues in the office who might be on the same stage as I was when I was doing my APC. So I've been heavily involved in that as well, which I get quite a lot of satisfaction from due to the fact I know what it feels like going through that process. It can be quite stressful. The best bits about my day-to-day is it's an investigative approach. So when I get a challenge saying, well, I don't think my rateable value is correct, or there's something that's amiss, it's sometimes interesting to see what you can come across and how you can actually get to your value to determine whether or not it is reasonable or not reasonable. I think the worst bits about it is sometimes you do come across interesting parties where they don't see beyond the reasonableness of it. It's about, I want to pay less tax. So that part is not one of the best parts because sometimes you get to speak to these interesting parties, you empathize with them, but not really much weight can be added onto that. What attracted me to the surveying industry, I was born in a very small island, born and raised in the Commonwealth of Dominica, which is based in the Caribbean. And we get a lot of hurricanes. During hurricane season, it can be very disastrous because apart from properties, you've got bridges, infrastructure, all this form part of the built environment. That's always been something that's been bothersome to me when I lived in the Caribbean. As to what I could do about it, I didn't know. I moved to England about 17 years ago. I applied for this job to be an administrative assistant, and there was a vacancy came up to be a rent officer, and I jumped at the opportunity. And being a rent officer was about doing valuations and setting what we call the rents for housing benefit purposes. And the most interesting part about that is I get to set rents for large cities, for Bristol, for Swindon, for Gloucester, for the Cotswolds. And I was heavily involved in that. So being part of that job was quite satisfactory. I always liked the architecture in England. And in fact, when I moved to England, one of the first landmarks I went to see was the palace with my auntie, because I always wanted to see it in person to see what it's like. And when you look back and you think all these were built without the scaffolding, without the modern technology that we have now, I always found that intriguing. Overall, when I think of it in terms of why did I do the apprenticeship route, it was a long road for me. I started the NVQ level 4, and from that I went into my associated rigs, and then I had to wait to see whether or not there's any other route I could jump into, and I did the apprenticeship route, which was great because you get to study whilst you work, so you put all that practice into play. The difficult part about it is you've got a family, you've got a job, and your social life all happening at the same time. So it's hard. It was always going to be difficult, but I went through it. If I had the option to do a full-time degree, I would still choose the apprenticeship route. And if I have to give advice to anyone out there going through the same process, the built environment is a wonderful thing. It will always be needed. It's not just a want, it's a need. Sometimes when you look at the size or the characteristics of certain properties, personally for me, it gives me satisfaction to think that I'm part of this. And when you think of it, you've got to ask yourself why. Why do you want to be involved in that? It was about securing my career and securing my future for myself, for my kids, for my family. But apart from that, you want to be part of something that's significant, because the built environment is heavily involved with sustainability. And sustainability is not just what we can do today, but the impact it will have on the future generation. For me, when I had to go through my APC, there was this little video showing the wonderful world of surveying, irrespective of what pathway you choose. They're all great pathways. So my advice to anyone going into that route is think of what you want first. Financially, there is rewards for you. Career-wise, there is rewards for you. And then you've got to think as well, even when you have your full-time job. I've had so many offers whereby people want to offer me freelance work. It opened a lot of doors for you. And you are being part of something that, for me, that's very special. Being part of the built environment and being looked upon in respect of the RICS does everything in its power in respect of you being ethical and you having the technical ability to carry out your role. Thank you for listening.